They're called learning pods, and their use is expanding as parents seek out ways to make sure that their kids are actually learning during COVID-19, a time, of course, when many kids have been forced into online learning, an environment that may, well, work for some, but not for all. Dr. Terry Stoops is the director of the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation. He's been following this issue during COVID-19 and joins us now to talk about it. Terry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
What is a learning pod? How does it work?
Well, there's some disagreement about exactly what constitutes a learning pod, but generally it is when one or more parents get together with other families and provide some sort of educational opportunity for the children in the respective families. Now, it could be that the parents are the ones that are actually conducting the instruction. It could be that those parents pool their resources and hire a teacher to provide the instruction, and sometimes it could be in person, or in other times it could use online resources and virtual education to provide instruction. So there is really no definite definition of what a learning pod is, except for the fact that it is an informal arrangement that is parent-driven and parent-created for the benefit of one or more families.
As we have dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic for 9-10 months now, you've been following closely what's been going on with parents trying to educate their kids and school systems trying to determine, are they sending kids to online learning? Are they coming back to school, or what? What have you found as to the prevalence of these learning pods being developed?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, because we really don't know how many pods there are out there or how many students are engaged in this sort of instruction. And mostly that's because if they have registered themselves as homeschools, then those are numbers that are only released in July of every year. So we'll maybe see a large increase in homeschools that are reflected in the learning pods, the increase in learning pods, the use of learning pods. If they register themselves as private schools, we're in the same situation, that we won't know those numbers until July. And it may be hard for us to differentiate between a conventional private school and a private school that is functioning as a pod. So we really don't have good numbers about this. We can assume that there are probably a few thousand students, maybe even more in North Carolina, that are engaging in this type of instruction. The main place you find out about it is on social media. If you go on Facebook in particular, you can see that there are people that are recruiting students for learning pods, that are talking about their learning pods and talking about how beneficial they have been for their children.
It sounds almost like you are describing homeschooling. But it's just got a different name to it, and people now have been sort of nudged, forced, pushed into trying to find an option like this because of COVID-19. Is it really just more of an outgrowth of homeschooling?
Well, I think it's inspired by homeschooling. North Carolina's homeschooling statute only allows a homeschool to have no more than two families.
Okay.
So if there is a pod that has more than two families, then technically it would be a private school. But we also have co-ops that many homeschool students engage in. These are basically cooperative enterprises where homeschool families get together and they provide services for each other's children. It could be that some of these pods are functioning as co-ops in the larger homeschool community. And that's why it gets so difficult in defining what these are, because there are so many of these different arrangements that parents have, especially homeschool parents have, to be able to provide a rich education for their children. And this is a great thing, by the way. This is really what we want. Parents so engaged in their child's education and so willing to provide alternative arrangements for that education that they're coming up with creative solutions for their child and for the children of other families. I think this is a really great development, and I believe truly that it's an outgrowth of North Carolina's rich, expansive homeschool environment.
You're right. It's tough to define, tough to quantify, but it really is exciting, because what it says, to me at least, is that parents, because they've been forced to have this one-on-one relationship with their kids in terms of education because of COVID-19, they're suddenly discovering things about their kids, and they're discovering resources. And Terry, could this be sort of the tipping point, so to speak, that will push the school choice movement in North Carolina even further down the road of opening up opportunities for more parents?
Yeah, I believe the key here is that many of those that are having pandemic pods, that have their children enrolled in some sort of pod-like arrangement, are well-to-do parents. They're families that can afford to have a parent stay home or can afford to hire a teacher or a virtual instruction for their children. And these are parents that usually are able to afford houses in neighborhoods where their children are assigned to great schools. So these are usually parents that don't have much of a need for school choice, don't even have to think about school choice because they live in good neighborhoods, their kids are going to good schools, and then suddenly they're forced to find avenues for school choice. And now these parents are recognizing the importance of school choice because, in the school choice debate, we always talk about how necessary it is for low income, for special needs students. And North Carolina has done a great job of providing educational options for those children. But usually those that are in the upper income brackets don't think about choice because they don't have to. This has forced them to recognize and appreciate school choice and hopefully in the future become staunch advocates of school choice.
That's such an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's important. So going forward, Terry, as we come out of the pandemic, hopefully soon, as things get back to, quote, normal for our lives, do you think that these parents will go back to their regular routine since they won't be forced to deal with their child's education day in and day out? Or are they going to say, you know what, maybe I should get behind some of these changes that would allow my family or the neighbor down the street or the neighbor who lives in a neighborhood where they're not well-to-do to be able to have those choices to do what's best for their kid?
I think you will see some that will end up sending their kids back to school just because of the burden that a pod can place on a family, even the financial burden especially. But I think that, and anecdotal evidence tells me that parents that have had their children in pods are seeing a transformation in their child, a transformation for the better. Not only are they learning, but their emotional state is much better. They're much more engaged. Simply put, they're happier. And I think a parent that sees their child that's happy in a situation in a pandemic pod is going to be more likely to find an alternative arrangement where they can continue to be that successful, not only academically but emotionally. Because as parents, that's really what we care about, is making sure that our entire child's experience is positive, not just that they have a great education and learn what they're supposed to. So I think that's the real key. And I think children are happy. I think parents are happy. And it's the source of that happiness that is going to lead them, I believe, to pursue educational options in the coming school year.